Okay, so today we are reviewing this book, The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. If you have not seen my reviews before, I do spoiler and non-spoiler versions in my reviews, starting off with non-spoiler, giving 3 pros and 3 cons to the book, and then we go into the spoiler section when we talk all about the everything that I thought, felt, experienced in a spoiler way. So, let's get into this book. What did I think about it? What did I rate it? In the spoiler-free version, 3 pros, 3 cons. What are they? I'll tell you in just a moment. Okay, so the first thing I want to say about this book is that the first con that I want to give about this book is that on the whole, I did not actually enjoy this book. I really didn't. And I really wanted to. For those of you who have been following my reading vlogs and my April TBR, you would be aware that I was reading The Hobbit as well as Lord of the Rings 1, 2, and 3 this month because it is one of my best friend's birthdays and this is her favourite series, and I knew nothing about it going in at all except for the titles of the books, and that's all I knew. So I went into reading this book and, I should give you the genre and my rating. So the genre of this book, I took me a lot of research to figure it out, but the genre of this book is a middle grade fantasy, and my rating that I gave it is 2 stars. So now I'm going to discuss why. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there saying, Mr. Francy, this is an amazing book. That's heresy that you're giving it 2 stars. And that's fine, because everyone has their own opinion on books that they read. And I've always said that I'm going to give my honest opinion on a book regardless of whether I love it or hate it. You're going to hear the truth from me. You're not going to hear me upsell a book that I don't love. So let's talk about why. Here are my 3 cons. My first con, as I did say, is that I did not really enjoy this book. I think there were 2 scenes that I liked, and aside from that, I just didn't find it to be enjoyable. In fact, I found myself really just easily distracted while reading this book because of how mundane the storytelling was. My second con of this book is the narrator style. This book is... I didn't know what this was called, but I have found out upon research of what it's called. It's called a narrator style. This book is written in a narrator style. Now, what I mean by this is, let me give an example that's not to do with this book. Let's just say you have a main character that is walking down the street and they bump into someone whose name is Henry, and the main character's name is Tiffany. The book will say something like, Tiffany was walking down the street and then she bumped into a man named Henry, and they start a conversation. The next thing you know, then the author is saying, now, you and I know that... Sorry, I have people in the background trying to ignore the noise. So, you and I know that Henry is not a nice person, but Tiffany didn't know that. But as Henry is not going to be a bad person until the end of the story, we will just continue on. And seriously, 2 things I want to say to that point. One, it takes you out of the story. See, you're so engrossed in Tiffany in this non-spoiler, completely different to this story example that I'm giving here. You're completely engrossed in Tiffany walking down the street, meeting this guy, wanting to know how their interactions with each other is going to affect the plot and their characters and everything about that, everything to do with that. And then all of a sudden the author has you completely shoved aside from the plot to give their own little narrative commentary, and I just didn't appreciate that. Secondly, as I did say in that example, and the type of example that I'm giving appears in this book where the author says, well, you and I know that Henry is bad, but since he's not bad till the end of the book, we will not talk about this anymore. Yeah, there are spoilers throughout this book, and it's really annoying. I'm sorry, but anytime I heard a spoiler, read a spoiler, I was like, really? Why do I need to keep reading? I know what's going to happen. So the whole author narration writing style is just not something that I enjoy at all. The third con for me with this book is the singing. Okay. Can we talk about the singing? every 5 to 10 pages, I'm probably over exaggerating here, but I don't care because it feels like that. Every 5 to 10 pages, there is a friggin' song in this book, and that's fine. Normally, it's just that it doesn't matter what medium I'm dealing with in any given moment this week, everyone seems to be breaking out into song, and it's just annoying me. So that's that. But when I read anything lyrical, such as a song or a poem or some kind of stanza, whatever that word is, like that, my mind gets fixated on the style that they've approached for that. And so Tolkien approaches the style of, or uses the style of ABAB when he writes songs. So basically what that means is the first line is a line, the second line ends with a word, and then you have the third line, and then the fourth line, the final word, rhymes with the final word of the third line, which is fine. I don't have any issues with that, but the problem is then, once I've finished the song, it takes me about a page to get out of my head that every second line is going to rhyme, and that just really annoyed me, and that threw me off quite a bit as well. There are other things I just didn't like about this book as well, but I'll have to save that for the spoiler version. We're already taking up a massive chunk of time in this non-spoiler version, so let's get right to the prose. The protagonist in this book, his name is Bilbo Baggins, although I want to call him Mr. Baggins because throughout this he's mainly referred to as Mr. Baggins rather than Bilbo. And I love his character. I love everything about him. To not give away too much of the story, basically Mr. Baggins and others end up going on a quest. At the beginning of this book, Bilbo Baggins basically says, I don't want to go on this quest because people like me, we don't do quests, we don't like adventures, they're really scary. And then he ends up going on this quest, and he's just... he's such a beautiful character. He has a beautiful soul, and I really loved getting to know his character more than the plot, which says a lot because, as you guys know, I much prefer a book that is plot-driven than character-driven, but I really appreciated the character of Bilbo Baggins. The next thing I want to talk about is Chapter 1. I can't reveal the spoiler of Chapter 1, I'll do that in the spoiler version, but what I can say is Chapter 1 was so hilarious that I was laughing all the way through reading Chapter 1, and it set me up for a really good time that unfortunately Tolkien couldn't see all the way through for me. I guess I'm just not the target audience for this type of book, but it was so funny. It really was. All these unexpected things were happening, and the way that the main character is reacting to this was just hilarious, and so I did absolutely love that. My third pro is there's a scene that comes up between the protagonist, Mr. Baggins, and another character who I won't tell you about this character in case you haven't read the book, but I'll tell you the character's name in case you have read this book or you know about this character. The character I'm referring to, his name is Gollum. There is a scene between Gollum and Mr. Baggins that I found to be so highly entertaining. I really did. I loved it. But unfortunately, aside from the first chapter and the scene with Mr. Baggins and Gollum, I just did not enjoy the rest of the book at all. I don't feel that I am a target audience for this book because it's written in a way... J.R.R. Tolkien wrote this book for his children, and I can very much see him sitting there reading this book to his children, like a chapter a night, or if the chapters are too long, which sometimes they are quite long, a section a night. I can see him verbally reading this out loud to children. If you are a parent and you pick this book up and you verbally read it to your children, I'm sure your children will be amazed. But the thing is, I wasn't reading this out loud to anyone. I was internally reading it to myself. And so the narration style really threw me off. But I feel that if you're reading it verbally to children, they will love the whole book. It is middle grade. There's not a lot of horrible things that go on at all. I think this is an easy read for someone of my age, maybe not for a child that is middle grade, but if the child is having this book read to them, I'm sure they will absolutely love it. It's just not the book for me. Alright, so that is where I'm going to leave it for my spoiler-free section. So if you are going to be leaving us here because you have not read this book and you don't want to be spoiled, I completely understand. Thank you so much for joining me. I post videos every Wednesday and Sunday with reviews in between, letting you go with peace, blessings, and so much love, and I'll see you guys in the next one. As for you guys who are sticking around with me for the spoiler version, we'll be back in just a moment. Don't go away. Okay, so now let's talk about the spoilers to do with this book. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about the plot. I know I've said this before and then gone on and spoken about the plot, but I'm just going to be very brief because if you read this book, you already know. If you haven't, basically, this book revolves around the protagonist, Mr. Bilbo Baggins, who is a hobbit, and he is invited by a wizard by the name of Gandalf to go on a quest. And that's basically where I'm going to leave it. Mr. Baggins doesn't want to go on the quest, but he ends up being forced to go on the quest anyway. Well, not really forced, but it seems like he's kind of forced to go on this quest, and he does become all the better for it, absolutely, but yeah, things happen along the way. So now let's get to my thoughts. Okay, I want to premise this by saying that I could have done this review a lot earlier, and my hand's getting a little tired holding this up. The only reason that I didn't review this book a couple of days ago is because I wanted the entire experience. I wanted to read the book and watch the movie, or at least I thought read the book and then watch the movie, but turns out it's more read the book, watch movie 1, movie 2, and movie 3. So, yeah, I wanted to watch the movie, turned out to be movies, to compare and contrast, but I just don't think it's worth comparing and contrasting the book to the films, because while the film does keep the bones of the story, because there are 3 films for one tiny book that's not even a tome, there is so much creative license that is taken and thrown into the film. So to give you one great example, this book follows the perspective of Mr. Bilbo Baggins, the Hobbit. If he is not experiencing, if there's anything going on that he doesn't experience, we don't know about it until he's being told about it. So in the 3 films, there are moments where Gandalf is off doing something, or the dwarves may be doing something, or the elves may be off doing something that Mr. Baggins is just not a part of. So we don't see it live when we're reading the book, or we don't know about it until he's kind of being given a paraphrased version of what's going on. There are things that are included in the book that were paraphrased here that we do see live, because keeping it to just the perspective of Mr. Baggins is not what happens in the film, but there's also things that are added in the film that are not in the book at all. If I had to choose between the two, I definitely prefer the films. I'm not a fan of fantasy that doesn't come with a solid magic system, and at least for the sake of The Hobbit, I haven't read any of the Lord of the Rings books, but for the sake of The Hobbit, there isn't really a magic system, despite the fact that there is a wizard in this book. Now, I did feel rather intrigued to read and watch, considering there is a wizard. However, one of the things I really didn't like about this book is that Gandalf really doesn't seem to be that powerful a wizard, or if he is, he doesn't really seem to be doing a lot to help out everyone. Let's go to an example in the book instead of the films, because this is a review of the book. There is a moment where everyone's kind of stuck up a tree because the wolves are trying to track them down, and Gandalf does this spell causing fire to sprout near the wolves, and that either kills them or makes them run away. I don't remember which it is. But that's really the only thing that he does with all this magical power that he has. Now, when I say magic system, there is no magic system in this book. There is nothing to show us what Gandalf can and can't do. There's nothing that shows us how he got his magic, how he casts spells. None of that. In fact, it seems rather comical to me that there is a wizard in this book who doesn't really seem to be doing anything that wizardry except for casting that fire on the wolves. So that was very much a letdown for me. And so then the book as well as the films, and the films he does have a little more magic and I do appreciate that, but still not a lot. They are mostly fantasy without any sort of magic at all, and that is a letdown for me. The films are much easier to watch, though. They're not a film series that I think I would be inclined to watch again, but I appreciate that I watched them because it was good to see the visuals of the things that I had read about come to life on the screen, and you can tell that they were massive budget films because it was just done really well. And yeah, so I really appreciate all the hard work that was put into it, don't get me wrong, but I really just didn't enjoy it that much. There is a scene with the dragon, Smog, which I really did enjoy, and I did love the fact that they basically had the second film revolve all around Smog. Well, the second half of the second film and the first bit of the third film. Anyway, I'm still trying to get my head around the fact that there are 3 films dedicated to one book that is like a 300-page book. But anyway, we'll just let that go. But yeah, I did not, focusing on back on the book itself, I did not enjoy myself reading this book. I also didn't like Tolkien's writing style in general, and I'm not referring to the narrating style, I'm referring to what I'm humorously going to refer to as a ye old English style. I don't really like reading ye old English, that's just me, and there are many moments throughout this book where it seems like the writing is very old-fashioned. Now, I do understand that this book was written a very long time ago, and so I can't expect it to be written in modern-day language, but I'm just making a point that this is something that I just don't enjoy, personally. Yeah, I don't know. I enjoyed the magic of the ring, but again, the magic system to do with the ring really wasn't explained. I'm kind of hoping it will be explained in Lord of the Rings. All we know is that when Mr. Baggins puts the ring on, he becomes invisible. That's all we know. So who forged this ring and how long has it been around and who else has used this ring aside from Gollum, who I assume used the ring because that's where it was found. It came from Gollum. So, is there anything else the ring can do aside from making you invisible? It's very simplistic when I consider a lot of other books that I've read, such as Rainbow Rowell's stuff or Brandon Sanderson's stories, things like that, especially Mistborn, which is an epic fantasy with hard magic systems. Comparing this to Mistborn, there's no comparison between the two because Mistborn stands above and beyond as far as its magic system is concerned, and certainly with the adventure as well. But I'm not here to make a comparison, I'm here to just talk about the book, and I just overall just did not enjoy it. The singing. Alright, can we talk about this singing, and does Tolkien like to sing, and is that why he included it in the book, or do his kids like to hear him sing because every 10 pages he would have been singing to his kids? And I don't know, the first time I read a song, I thought, okay, this is nice, and if that was it, I would have been okay with it. Then 10 pages later there was another song, and I thought, okay, it's a bit repetitive, but it is what it is. But by the time I got to like the 3rd or 4th song, I was over the singing. I was going from rolling my eyes to really just being really annoyed by all the singing. I felt that it wasn't needed. I understand that this is a middle grade book, and I understand that you want to put in little things, little quirks that make a book interesting and make it fun for a middle grade style, but it just didn't work for me. No. I want to end on a positive, and that is the character arc of Bilbo Baggins. I really appreciated how he said, hobbits don't go on quests, we don't go on adventures, that's a bad thing, we don't do that. Oh my gosh, let's talk about chapter 1 and then talk about Mr. Baggins. So, as you guys know, Gandalf goes to him and says, we need you to go on a quest, and Bilbo very politely says, oh, no, thank you, we don't do that kind of thing, which bless him. And then the next day, all these dwarves start coming into his home. It was so funny to read, and it was still funny to watch it, even though I knew what was going to happen. So the actors portrayed that scene really well, but reading it, it was just like, here's one, there's another one, another one, another one, another one. Seriously, it was so good. One thing I'll say about the film, though, that considering there are three films, you would think that they would, include everything in the book, but that they left out of the film that I wish they'd included was there was a point where Mr. Baggins wasn't appreciating all the hard work he had to go through to feed everyone that had come to his home, and he was internally thinking it'd be nice to get some help. No sooner had he thought that than three of the dwarves actually came and assisted him. It would have been nice to see that, to show that softer side of them, that they are willing to help him out. I get that it's only chapter 1 and it's only the first couple of scenes of the first film as well, but it would have been nice to actually see that being played out in the film also. Comparison of book to film, I loved the scene with Gollum in this book. I love riddles personally, so the fact that Gollum was debating over whether or not to eat Mr. Baggins or to show him the way out of the cave, and the way that this would be determined would be whoever couldn't answer a riddle correctly first. I had so much fun with that. That was so good. I think that was very well written. I didn't necessarily enjoy it in the film, though. I think that J.R.R. Tolkien portrayed it extremely well in the book, but I think in the film, I feel like they kind of wanted to just go above and beyond with Gollum's character. And while I appreciate what they were doing, because Gollum does have his own idiosyncrasies about him, and I understand that, I felt that the game itself, and that's what they end up calling it, Mr. Baggins and Gollum call it a game, the game itself didn't seem to be as important as in the film as it was in the book, because they were spending way too much time, I guess, trying to scare everyone with how Gollum looks. And in the book, Gollum doesn't come across anywhere near as scary. Yes, he does talk to himself, and yes, he says, my precious, and all this kind of stuff. I mean, Gollum is Gollum. There's really no character out there like Gollum that I'm aware of. So yes, that does come across in the book, but his physical description or things that he did, they were described, but they weren't highlighted, where in the film it seemed to be much more highlighted. They much more seemed to highlight Gollum and the kind of character that he is, his looks, the way he acts, all that kind of stuff over the actual game itself, and that really disappointed me. One thing that I really didn't like about the book, because I found it to be typical middle grade, which is fine, it's filling the brief of the kind of book that it is all the rhyming names of the characters, like Feely and Keely, and I don't remember the rest of them, but, Boggin and Doggin and Woggin, and I don't remember all of their names, I don't. But they're all, there's at least 2 or 3 that all rhyme with each other, and I just found that to be a bit, Bumber and Boober, and gosh, I don't even remember their names. I don't even know if I'll be able to find their names, really. So, yeah, I'm just trying to look at a standard page to see if there are any names that come up to me, but not really. No. Oh, here we go. Keely and Feely and Bifer and Bofer and Dory and Nori and very middle grade. It was good to start with, but I kind of got over it towards the end. Now let's compare it to the film. I did not really feel any which way about the dwarves while reading this book. I was very invested in Mr. Baggins. I was a little bit invested in Gandalf because I wanted to see him use a lot more magic than he did, and was hoping, even towards the end, thinking they're going to save it to the last moment. He's going to do this massive spell that he didn't do. But anyway, so I was invested in those two, but I was not invested in the dwarves. In the trilogy of films, I was very invested in some of the dwarves, especially Keely and Feely. I was very much invested in them throughout the series, and there's another character that I do not remember from this book, and I do not remember his name in the film either. But he's the guy that rescues them and takes the company to his home where his kids live. I do not remember his name, but I'm sure if you've read it, you do. Comment in space below and let me know. I found myself very invested in his character as well. But yeah, it was interesting. There are things that the film had me feeling that the book didn't, and generally 9 times out of 10, it's the other way around. The book has me feeling a lot more than the film, but I don't know. In this case, I think the film did some good things, did some bad things, and included things that we didn't need, and then didn't include things that I felt we did need, and yet for some odd reason they felt that they needed 3 parts, 3 films for a book that's about 300 pages long. But anyway, I'm just going to have to let that go. But all in all, I just did not appreciate this book. I think the character arc of Mr. Bilbo Baggins was really good and really fun to watch him grow as a character. And I really appreciated that first scene, as I said, and how all the dwarves just kept showing up, and that was a lot of fun. I appreciated the loyalty within the group, aside from Thorin, because that really just depended on the day and I guess the weather, whether he liked Mr. Baggins or not. But anyway, moving on. But I also appreciated the, what do we call it, the David versus Goliath approach that Tolkien takes with Baggins and the characters that they are, shall we say, warring against, like the trolls and the ogres, and I'm not going to get into all the names. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who are saying you're misquoting what these characters are, but, you know, it is what it is. Lastly, I do want to say that the films made me fall in love with the elves. I really love the elves and almost wanted to swear allegiance to them and run off and live with them because they were just so much fun, and I love their little peaceful community. I get that they didn't stand up for the dwarves in the beginning, but I just loved their culture and wanted to go and live with them. But in the book, I just felt like Tolkien doesn't really, the way Tolkien writes it, he doesn't have me feeling anything for the elves at all. I don't really care for them. But anyway, so that's that. All in all, I end up giving this book 2 stars because it's fine. I say that with a whole lot of love. It's fine. It's just not the book for me. But I am really looking forward to seeing how I go with The Lord of the Rings, Book 1, next week, because if the things that I don't like about this book are gone in Book 1 of The Lord of the Rings, then I think I might love that book. We'll see how we go. Likewise, as I've done with this one, I will read Book 1 of Lord of the Rings next week and watch the film, and then I will do the review on it so that I can really enhance the reading experience as I have with this one, watching 3 films after reading 1 book. But anyway, so I'm sorry for the delay in getting this out to you guys, but there it is. There's my review on The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. 2 stars because it was fine. It just wasn't the book for me. I didn't hate it. I just thought it was okay. And that's where I'm going to leave it. If you have any comments, thoughts, and or questions, please do leave them in the space below, or you can email me. I include my email in all of my descriptions now, so you can do that, and we'll continue the discussion over there. I want to thank you all for watching, letting you guys go. Peace, blessings, and so much love. I post videos every Wednesday and Sunday with reviews in between. Until next time, mwah. Happy reading. Bye.